My name is Captain Claire Hartley. I am 32 years old, and on a Thursday morning in April, I walked back onto base after a 5-day training exercise and was told by a duty officer I had never met that the exercise I had just completed did not exist. I said, "I'm sorry?" He said, "There is no record of any training exercise at that location in the last 30 days. What unit are you with?" I told him. He typed it into his terminal. He looked at the screen. He looked at me. He said, "Captain, there is no unit by that designation in this installation's records." I had been part of that unit for 3 years. I had just spent 5 days in the field with 11 members of that unit. I was standing in front of a duty officer in a base I had been assigned to for 3 years, being told that I and the people I had just left did not officially exist. I said, "Who is your commanding officer?" He told me. I did not recognize the name. I said, "And before him? Who held this post before him?" He said, "Colonel James Whitmore. He was reassigned 8 months ago." Whitmore, my commanding officer, reassigned 8 months ago, without telling me? I said, "Thank you. I will sort out the administrative confusion." I walked out of the duty office. I sat in my vehicle in the parking lot, and I tried to remember the last time I had seen anyone from outside my unit.
Let me tell you about the unit first. Designation Echo 7. 12 soldiers, including me. We operated as a specialized analytical and field intelligence team. Our work was classified. Our missions were compartmentalized. We reported directly to Whitmore, and through him to a command structure I had never had full visibility into. This was not unusual. Compartmentalization is standard in intelligence work. You know what you need to know. You do not ask about the rest. I had been with Echo 7 for 3 years. I trusted the people in it completely. Sergeant Anna Reyes, Corporal David O'Coffer, Lieutenant Sarah Chen. 8 others whose names and faces I knew as well as my own. We had left for the training exercise on Saturday morning, standard protocol. 5 days in a field location 2 hours from base. Navigation, extraction scenarios, communications training. On Wednesday evening, I had been separated from the group during a night navigation exercise. Standard procedure, individual component. I had completed my route and returned to the rally point at 0600 Thursday as instructed. No one was there. I waited 90 minutes. No one came. I drove back to base, and a duty officer I had never met told me that my unit did not exist. The object that I carried through everything that followed was a photograph, not a digital one, a physical print, 4x6, the kind you have developed at a pharmacy. Anna had taken it 3 weeks before the exercise, the whole unit, outside our operations building. Someone had brought a cake because O'Coffer had just been promoted. We were all laughing at something Chen had said. I kept it in the left breast pocket of my jacket. I had kept it there for 3 weeks without thinking about why. Standing in that parking lot, I took it out and looked at it. 12 people, all of them real, all of them present 3 weeks ago, all of them officially non-existent this morning. I put it back in my pocket. I took out my phone. I called Anna's number. It rang 6 times. No answer. I called O'Coffer. 6 rings. No answer. I called Chen. The number you have dialed is not in service. I sat in the vehicle for a long time. Then I made the only call I could think to make. Her name was Colonel Patricia Morrison, Inspector General's office. I had her number because Whitmore had given it to me 18 months ago and said, "Keep this." He had not explained why. He had just said, "Keep it." I had kept it. She answered on the second ring. I said, "Colonel, my name is Claire Hartley. I am assigned to Echo 7 under Colonel James Hartley." I have just returned from a 5-day training exercise, and I have been informed that my unit does not appear in installation records. I cannot reach any member of my unit by phone. I am told Colonel James Whitmore was reassigned 8 months ago without my knowledge." Morrison was quiet for 4 seconds. Then she said, "Captain Hartley, where are you right now?" I said, "Installation parking lot, Building C." She said, "Do not go back inside. Do not speak to anyone on that installation. Drive to the following address." She gave me an address 40 minutes away. She said, "Captain, the photograph you have in your pocket, bring it." I stopped. I said, "How do you know about the photograph?" She said, "Whitmore told me about it 18 months ago. He said if you ever called me, it would mean something had gone wrong and that you would have the photograph with you because you always keep it close." Whitmore had known. 18 months ago, Whitmore had known that something might go wrong and had prepared for this call. I said, "What is happening to my unit?" She said, "Drive. I will explain everything when you get here." I drove. Morrison met me at a secure facility 40 minutes from the installation. She was 54 years old, silver hair. She moved with the specific efficiency of someone who has been managing serious situations for a long time and has stopped wasting motion on anything that matters. She sat across from me at a plain table in a plain room. She said, "I am going to tell you some things that are classified above your current clearance level. I am authorized to share them with you because of the situation you are now in. Do you understand?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Echo 7 is not in installation records because Echo 7 does not officially exist on that installation. Your unit operates under a separate classified designation that is not accessible through standard terminal queries. The duty officer you spoke to this morning does not have the clearance to see your unit in the system. That is by design." I said, "Then why doesn't the duty officer know to expect personnel from units he can't see?" She said, "Because something changed 8 months ago, when Whitmore was reassigned." She said, "Whitmore was not reassigned voluntarily. He was removed by a senior officer who had reason to want Echo 7's oversight structure changed." I said, "Why?" She said, "Because Echo 7 had been generating intelligence reports for 3 years that were inconvenient for certain people in the command structure. Whitmore had been protecting those reports, protecting the unit, making sure the work reached the right people." She said, "When he was removed, the new oversight structure had different priorities." I said, "What happened to my unit?" Morrison looked at me steadily. She said, "The 5-day training exercise was real. Your unit completed it. But on Wednesday evening, when you were separated for the navigation component, something else happened at the rally point." She said, 11 members of Echo 7 were met at that rally point by personnel I am still identifying. They were told the unit was being immediately stood down, that their assignments were terminated, that they were to report to a processing facility for reassignment. I said, "And they went." She said, "They were given orders, signed orders. They followed them." I said, "Why wasn't I told?" Morrison said, "Because you were the one member of the unit whose removal required more care, because you have a relationship with Whitmore that the people who removed him were aware of, because they suspected that if you were present, you would ask the right questions." She said, "So they separated you first and processed the others while you were completing your navigation route alone." I said, "They knew I would call you." She said, "They suspected it, which is why they moved quickly. They wanted the unit dispersed before you reached a phone." I said, "Where are my people?" She said, "We are working on that right now. All 11 have been processed through a reassignment system that I have access to. None of them have been harmed. They are being held at a processing facility under administrative hold while their new assignments are finalized." She said, "They do not know what happened. They believe the stand-down order was legitimate." I said, "Is it?" She said, "No." I want to pause here. Because understanding that my unit had been deliberately disbanded while I was alone in a field at night is the moment everything shifted from confusing to something else entirely. If you have ever been the only person left standing after something was taken apart around you, drop a comment below and subscribe right now, because what Morrison did in the next 72 hours and what happened to the people who signed that stand-down order is the reason Echo 7 exists again today. Morrison moved in 3 directions simultaneously. First, she contacted Whitmore directly. He had been reassigned to an administrative post 400 miles away. He had been waiting. He had known this call would come. He had prepared documentation over 8 months that he had been unable to act on from his new position. He sent Morrison 47 pages within the hour. Second, Morrison filed an emergency administrative hold on the processing of all 11 Echo 7 reassignments. The hold froze every transfer pending an Inspector General review. It reached the processing facility at 11:43 a.m., 14 minutes before O'Coffer's reassignment paperwork was finalized. 14 minutes. Third, she initiated a formal investigation into the stand-down order. The signatures on the order, the chain of authorization, the senior officer whose removal of Whitmore had started everything.
The investigation took 90 days. I was not idle during those 90 days. Morrison gave me a temporary assignment within her office, research and documentation support. It kept me close to the investigation without compromising it. Whitmore's 47 pages were the foundation of everything. He had been documenting for 8 months, quietly, from his administrative post, every irregularity he had witnessed before his removal, every report that had been suppressed, every piece of intelligence that had not reached the people it was supposed to reach. 47 pages of careful, methodical documentation from a man who had been removed precisely because he was careful and methodical. The investigation confirmed everything in those pages, and more. The senior officer at the center of it was a brigadier general named Marcus Holt. He had been suppressing intelligence reports from Echo 7 for 14 months, reports that contradicted operational decisions he had already committed to, reports that would have raised serious questions about those decisions if they had reached the appropriate command level. He had removed Whitmore to eliminate the protection around Echo 7. He had disbanded the unit to eliminate the source. He had not counted on Whitmore giving me a phone number 18 months ago and saying, "Keep this," without explaining why. The investigation took 90 days. I was not idle during those 90 days. Morrison gave me a temporary assignment within her office, research and documentation support. It kept me close to the investigation without compromising it. Whitmore's 47 pages were the foundation of everything. He had been documenting for 8 months, quietly, from his administrative post, every irregularity he had witnessed before his removal, every report that had been suppressed, every piece of intelligence that had not reached the people it was supposed to reach. 47 pages of careful, methodical documentation from a man who had been removed precisely because he was careful and methodical. The investigation confirmed everything in those pages, and more. The senior officer at the center of it was a brigadier general named Marcus Holt. He had been suppressing intelligence reports from Echo 7 for 14 months, reports that contradicted operational decisions he had already committed to, reports that would have raised serious questions about those decisions if they had reached the appropriate command level. He had removed Whitmore to eliminate the protection around Echo 7. He had disbanded the unit to eliminate the source. He had not counted on Whitmore giving me a phone number 18 months ago and saying, "Keep this," without explaining why.
The photograph. Morrison asked me for it on the second day. She needed it for the documentation, evidence that the unit existed, that the 12 people in it were real. I handed it to her. She had it copied and returned the original to me within the hour. I put it back in my left breast pocket. It stayed there for 90 days. Here is what happened at the end of 90 days. Brigadier General Marcus Holt was relieved of command pending the outcome of a formal investigation. The investigation found sufficient grounds for court-martial proceedings on charges of suppression of intelligence, abuse of authority, and misconduct. He was convicted on all 3 charges. He is serving 8 years. The officer who had physically executed the stand-down order on Wednesday evening, a major acting on Holt's instructions, received a formal censure and was reduced in rank.
Colonel James Whitmore was reinstated to his previous command position. He drove back from his administrative post on a Tuesday morning. He walked into the operations building. He sat down at his desk. He called me. He said, "You kept the number." I said, "You told me to." He said, "I know. I'm glad you did." I said, "You knew 18 months ago that something like this was coming." He said, "I suspected it. I didn't know what form it would take. I just knew that if it happened, you would be the one who made the call." I said, "Why me?" He said, "Because you are the person in that unit who keeps a photograph in their breast pocket. You keep things close. You pay attention to what matters. You don't let go of the people around you even when the paperwork says you should." He paused. He said, "And because I knew you had Morrison's number and that you would use it." Echo 7 was formally reconstituted 6 weeks after Holt's conviction. All 11 soldiers were reassigned back to the unit, every transfer reversed, every record corrected. Anna came back first. She walked into the operations building on a Monday morning, and she looked at me and she said, "So, what did I miss?" I said, "A lot. I'll brief you." She said, "Did you keep the photograph?" I took it out of my left breast pocket. She laughed. Then we got back to work.
The photograph is on my desk now, not in my pocket, on my desk, in a frame. 12 people outside an operations building, a cake, someone laughing at something Chen said. All 12 of us back where we belonged, because a duty officer told me my unit did not exist, and instead of accepting that, I walked to my vehicle and took out a photograph and called a number a man had given me 18 months ago without explaining why. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is keep the number and know when to call it. Here is what being told your unit does not exist taught me. The people who try to erase things are counting on one assumption, that you will accept the erasure, that you will be confused enough or isolated enough or alone enough that you will walk away. They separated me from my unit deliberately. They processed 11 people while I was alone in a field. They moved fast. They were thorough. But they did not account for a photograph in a breast pocket, or a phone number kept for 18 months without knowing why, or the specific quality of a soldier who keeps things close and does not let go of the people around her, even when the paperwork says she should. Keep the number. Keep the photograph. And when you are the only one standing and something tells you to make the call, make it. Drop a comment and tell me your story. I read every single one. And subscribe. I am here every week with a new story. Same ending every time. She stayed calm, she stayed quiet, then she won.